Hi, this is Paul. Yesterday I posted a mega 3-hour video. Much of the content I didn't make yesterday. Much of the content was a significant clip from my conversation with Annie Crawford and a bit from John Heer's video about orthodoxy, and an hour and 47 minutes of it from a conversation that I had with Sam Tiedemann way back in August of 2020 about Estuary, just as we were moving from the Jordan Peterson meetups to the Estuary movements, and Sam and Hank and a bunch of the Chicago guys were really wanting to start something to replace Pangburn, but I didn't want to go on with that. And Sam and I had this big conversation, and if you follow me on Twitter, you already know what I'm about to play, because one of the best points in the video, Sam says this.
Function.
It's also interesting that Sam's wearing the blue shirt and not me.
To want to be part of the kingdom work in whatever way that is available and open to me. And for whatever reason in God's plan, a lot of doors are often closed to me that I don't quite know why. Well, I do know why, but I don't know why. And so I will put my energy and my focus on those who let me. That's not an outrageous thing to do. And so this is something that I feel like I am welcome to participate in when a lot of other doors are closed. I kind of wish it wasn't this way. And for those reasons, you know full well that I'm scared of having this be too associated with churches. If this is like a ministry wing of the CRC church, I'll start getting the jitters. And you know full well that I am a living embodiment of what will make this a difficult sell to a lot of churches.
Yes.
Atheists and Christians, fine. Sam, less fine. And so...
Because atheists are pre-Christians. Sam's a heretic.
Right. Exactly. And so I know full well, while I have been elbowing you, like, why aren't you, I've said to you, why aren't you on the cover of Christianity Today? You're more interesting than 90% of what they talk about. And so, like, why don't more people know about all of the exciting things that are going on here, which is something that I thought so many Christians have been longing for decades. And yet when it starts happening, it seems like they're, conveniently ignoring it. And it's like, what is that about? And it's because of weird political stuff going on is the only reason that I can seemingly understand. But all right, so that's the church thing. There are a whole bunch of questions and issues about how this will relate to churches and to denominations and all of that stuff.
And that has been tricky. Now, this Saturday, I fly to Florida, and I spend a few days at what in the Christian Reformed Church is sort of an unprecedented thing. We're having a conference where classies are sending us out there. It is the denomination is blessing it in a sense, but the denomination doesn't have any money. And the Christian Reformed denomination is really struggling. The denomination thing is really struggling with this split that's happening in the CRC. And so this is a movement from below. Scott Vanderploeg, who I've done some videos of, he keeps winning synod, but I told him when he called me after the last time, because I talked to him, I said, Scott, you're fighting at the wrong level. Synod can say all the fancy words it wants about evangelism and things in America, or evangelism and church planting and all that stuff, but it has no power to do that. The power is all down here at the grassroots. And so, and what's interesting, because listening to this video, Sam, I should clip that face of his. It's a really funny one. Sam, for a long time, was wondering, when is the Christian Reformed Church going to pay attention? Well, at this conference, I am going to be giving a talk and a breakout group about Estuary. I wanted them to actually use the Estuary protocol in a much deeper way in the conference. I don't know if that will happen or not, but I have enough visibility because of Estuary and because of this channel and because of everything that's gone on in the CRC that I will get a little bit of attention from that. There's a banner article, but, and this is key, it's much more because the denomination itself is sort of flat on its back. And part of it is nobody imagines that Estuary. Well, okay, now let's get to Luke's video today. So in the video today, Rod Hare says at 2:10, I've never heard you state it so plainly, Paul. Of course you're a Christian pastor. Why would that surprise me to hear you say that? But that's on me. But does it change? But it does change how I think about my participation here. And I thought, oh, what did I say that grabbed Rod's attention so clearly? This is one of the things I said to Annie. I said, the goal is to produce Christians, not to produce YouTubers or pastors. Now we need YouTubers and we need pastors and we need people who do different things, but the goal of the Christian life is to create godly people who are pastors and accountants and electricians and tilers and the goal of the internet and the goal of everything we do on the internet should be now to produce the best people. The internet should facilitate that. And this is different from the goal of YouTube, which is to have us all watching YouTube 24/7 every day of the week. That is the goal of the machine. That is the goal of... So Rod, you've been on blast now, 2 videos today. I don't know that I know that you didn't hear me correctly because you didn't hear the point that I was making. Now, I tried to clean it up I tried to clean it up here in the comments by saying, if I had said good people, would you have heard it any differently? It's to create people that are fully alive. Does that sound different? He says, well, shucks. Yes, it would. And the point I was making was actually a point that I heard in the back of my mind as I was talking to Brian Sartor. So I restarted the stream. I reformatted the videos, at least that I have here. And now the videos on the old Randos from the basement or Convos from the basement channel, they're all going to be formatted, and see how you can go back over them and find the last 12 hours. And I've included, there's some good Woo and Adams third convo with me where we talk. So those of you who like the Woo's in that conversation. And I've now incorporated Freddie and Paul shows into the mix. Just hopefully because they're much shorter videos, they'll be within the bigger videos. So there's my in-house ad. And anyway, so my conversation with Brad's brother. So this is the second conversation in that series of these identical twins that have sort of gone this way because of Trump. And I dig into Brian's story, and the conversation went very well. I think you'll really enjoy it. But I thought about this point when I was talking to Brian. Now I have to find it. Some people who have lived it, you're going to your youth group, you're doing evangelism, you're abstaining, you're treating the opposite sex with a degree of deference, you're not smoking and drinking, you're being a diligent student, you're being a good son. I mean, that is the stack of what that means. And it's compared to kids who you see doing the other things. And the
normal kids.
Yeah, the normal kids. Yeah, yeah. Okay, so so you make the decision to go to Dallas Baptist University. One of the interesting things about both you and your brother, you both go into ordained ministry.
Yeah.
Well, talk to me about your sense of call and how that developed and what that looked like for you.
Lots of our peers in youth group would go forward maybe on a Sunday night or after a choir tour and say they want to surrender to full-time ministry. That was neither of us. We didn't know that much at the time. We didn't feel that pull at the time. We just knew that the pull was to, as I said, be serious about faith or be a Christian disciple that, I think we would have said wants to do great things or wants to do God's will. So we got out of high school, both of us, and got out of the youth group without ever, I think, I'm remembering it right. Never surrendering to full-time ministry. As that's what we called it.
Okay, now I didn't make this point. I thought of it there when I was talking to him because the conversation didn't go that way. But the path in many evangelical churches is you're watching this right now with the Orthodox moment in our culture. The cage stage part of Christian conversion, especially for a young man, especially in traditions where only men become clergy, you want to go to the top of the hierarchy. Well, what's at the top of the hierarchy? Well, it's being a minister or a foreign missionary or a monk or a priest. And, I had this conversation with Annie Crawford. My tradition says not so. It says not so, but it doesn't really believe not so. I've had this conversation many times in ordained ministry because technically in my tradition, each of us has a calling from God to fulfill in this world, and the vocation of being a minister is no higher than the vocation of being a baker, of being a plumber, of being a soldier, of being a politician, of being a garbage man. That vocation is no higher. We are all called by God to our vocation, to fulfill our vocation fully. And this is part of my point about what you're beginning to see in all of this is the beginnings of secularity. Calvinism has brought two things. And both of these things, we get to the end of the conversation with Brian. He says, I've read some Abraham Kuyper. I thought, oh boy, here we go. Dutch Calvinism. Kuyper, on one hand, Kuyper is the every square inch guy. And so all the CRC progressives loved Kuyper. But then there's the antithesis guy, where it's black and white, right and wrong, saved and damned, yes and no, on and off. And Calvinism has both those speeds, and Calvinism, as one of the forming religions of American culture, and Sam gets at this, Calvinism, it's former Calvinists that become many of these Unitarians, these New England Congregationalists, some of them like Park Street Church that Sam and I talks about in our conversation. Some of them stay Calvinistic, but Calvinism is sort of the bedrock beneath so much of American culture, including, let's say, Sam's formulation of moralistic therapeutic deism. And it's the embracing and turning away, and I talked a little bit about that. But it has everything to do with this point that, well, Luke will make it very articulately, but it has everything to do with this framing and this shaping, because the point I was making in the video is I reject this. I'm a Protestant. I'm a Calvinist. I reject this idea that the priest or the monk is higher than the butcher or the baker or the businessman. I reject that. A Protestant. God calls them to their own things. Now, Luke is going to pick this up. Luke had an amazing, I don't know if I can, Luke, can I speak highly enough of your live stream today? I might play the whole thing. I might comment on the whole doggone thing, Luke. I might not even clip, because there's a little tricky thing with live streams that it takes about 12 to 24 hours for YouTube to actually convert that live stream into a regular video, so that I can take that video off of YouTube and cut it up and do things with it. Shh, not supposed to do that. But all the YouTubers do. Change the filter on my mic so you can hear me whisper now. Jump in.
Hi, good morning, kitty cats. Meow meow. Man, how do I want to start this? Okay, lots of thoughts. So, I don't know if I'm going to open this up today. I don't know how long I'm going to be here because I have other things to do. But PBK dropped his 3-hour homeroom today, talking about some of the stuff I was talking about in yesterday's live stream, talking about online community. What was the title of it? The title of it is What is the internet for? Can it bless us? And what up, buddy? Also, I think the Telos of any online community is selling out. No. And this is a teaser. Well, yes and no, of course. Yes and no, Yanni. I was thinking yesterday, so I'm always thinking like, Clem Snide, God is he which lies forever just beyond the limit of what we already seem to know. And it's just my bent, man. That's my focus. I'm always like, what are we not seeing? What's out there? What's next? I'm interested in the vanguard. And so a conversation that Jess and I have started, but it's just been percolating like Missy, no. Who sings that? Another millennial. Neil, it's another millennial thing. Let's get it percolating while you're waiting. Your name. You know what I'm talking about. But so a blessing, a gift that comes to you. I don't know how to frame it or how to think about it, but it's like Christ and Antichrist is the clearest way to talk about it. But it's something manifests, emerges. Well, it's a simultaneous reciprocity between emanation and emergence. C. Vervaeke, Bishop Maximus, all those conversations. That is a symbol, heaven meeting earth.
Now I have to apologize because not everybody on the open channel is ready for all the Lukeisms. And there was another great live stream today in Jacob's Corner where they were having a discussion about AI, and Hezi comes in and talks about the fact that, at some point AI is going to be able to translate. And I thought, yeah, they'll need a translator for all the Lukeisms. We don't have Jeff P., who is the Luke whisperer, to try to explain all these things. But okay, Luke, keep going.
Something will happen, like a scapegoat to appease violence, but then you can mechanize that and turn it into the opposite of it, although it mirrors it and looks like it, and that becomes Antichrist. So online community for sure will sell out, because the temptations of selling out are big, whether it's money, status, fame, recognition, ego, pride, greed, whatever. I mean, there would definitely be people that sell out. For sure. And they will go out from us because they were not of us. So that's definitely going to happen. Elos Shmilos. What up? Good to see you, Pickton. Hezi, Ron, welcome. What I want to talk about, though, in here is something that happened in a group chat. But the question, Henry asked this, does TLC have a catechesis? And it's from, I should probably play it, but I was not prepared to play it. So it's a, and I play, PDK. It's from the clip that, where is it? No, where? So, it's basically, I'll just share the thing. You can go watch it if you want, because it's PDK's homeroom. I played some of it yesterday, but it's from this clip from, so John Hears, what's his channel? Heavy Things Lightly or something like that. Heavy Things Lightly or Heavy Things Slightly. See right here? That's his channel. Can we criticize the machine while using the internet? And he is interviewing this guy who kind of predated the internet almost, but he's the guy who runs the channel Protecting Veil. And it's a really old Orthodox YouTube channel. It was connected with Ancient Faith, I think. And he said he started doing CDs. But he basically says in there that the point of the internet is to get people to the Orthodox Church, a church, and then get people off the internet. And I don't agree, because again, that's a mechanism, and it's a denial. To me, it's a denial of ongoing transformation in certain mediums and even persons, because this is what I would propose. The TLC, this little corner of the internet, this online community of friends that centers around the central catechesis of the TLC is the Randos conversation. And its participation in the Randos conversation. So here we go. I will lay out a catechesis. What up there, hey Joseph Rivet? I'll lay out as I see it the catechesis of the TLC. So it starts by many different ways.
Okay, so some of you might want to know, what does he mean by catechesis? Catechesis is basically the formation of someone into something. And there was a little thing that broke out on Twitter between Brett Weinstein and Jonathan Peugeot. Jonathan basically said, Brett, you continue to be blinkered. And Brett was a little bit insulted, as well as kind of an insult. And then someone tagged me on it because I had made a video a few years ago of why Brett Weinstein can't see Jonathan Peugeot. And it has everything to do with formation. And that's why Luke is going to talk about initiation, because the truth is that the world, that part of what happened in the Enlightenment, and especially in New Atheism, is that we imagined that the world was flat. In that you can understand anything from anywhere, and it is just not true. You know, and you get to Brian and Brad, the identical twins who have gone this way. These two should understand each other about as well as anybody, because they used to be one thing. And the truth is that we always understand through a formation. So so the reason Brett can't understand what Jonathan is saying, and many others, Jonathan is hard to understand sometimes because he's talking out of a different perspective. You have this commonly between cultures. Sometimes you have it between men and women. Sometimes people just can't understand each other.
There are different avenues into the TLC. Okay, you may see a PBK video.
And so, you know, and that's part of the reason why I'm playing these things. Oh yeah, I remember him. These were good conversations.
It's almost like we have to take a contrarian position to be loyal to our moral camp. And I started thinking about the that documentary, The Century of Self, and stuff we see going on with social media.
Now you might say, gosh, I mean, all the time, all the yada, yada, yada. But that's what religion information is. You go to a service and you do the thing and you do it again and you do it again and you do it again. That's the power of ritual. It's the power of initiation. Initiation is usually traumatic because trauma has this powerful capacity in us to change us quickly. It's sort of the Zen of worldviews. And okay, back to Luke cooking.
You may see, and I will just affirm, the center of the TLC is the PBK sphere. It's downstream of Paul Vanderklay and the community because it's the Randos. It really started with the Randos, and it really is about relationships and community and persons. It's not about ideas. You know, the thing I said to Nathan Orman, Digital Gnosis, a long time ago when he was on a Friday live stream, it's deeper than ideas, man. It's about people. Because the person who said that, I think Mark Lefebvre said that in the video that I was playing the other day, that he said, you know, the most mysterious, complex, unencapsulable, infinitely fecund, generative thing is the person. It's why you can never plumb the depths of a human being and a person, which they are a generative mystery embodied. Yeah, Zimzum. Randos is the Zimzum. It's the space we create. Agreed. And so the Randos is the space for someone to share their story. Tell me about the house you grew up in. There's many avenues, and not everyone will have a Randos, but that was the initial formative liturgical catechetical, hard word to say, initiation into the TLC. And as Peugeot says, we never know anything but through initiation. I'll just take this down. We don't need this anymore. So this is the video where PBK plays stuff and he talks about things. And he would argue that, again, the thing that I'm disagreeing with, because I think he doesn't, and I don't blame him, because he doesn't understand, I think, the TLC. He sees the internet as just information and the information economy, and he just sees in the internet the machine. Here's the thing: Christ and Antichrist are always a hair's breadth. I largely agree with you. The internet largely has become selling out, and it's become a farm of it's that matrix shift where, like, oh, here, like the phone, this is for you, right? And this is a great thing, and we give you free stuff, right? But really what they're doing is mining information to sell you stuff. So then you become the product, and they sell your information to the corporation so they can sell you more stuff, and it's all greed, right? That is largely the internet. That is largely social media. Or they are rage farming to keep your attention, to possess you and keep your attention so they can make money. Making money, honey. But here's the thing. Can Christ manifest there? Or the divine spark? And genuine person making, genuine community, because I'm going to read a comment from this video from my friend Rod too, because this is part of this. So don't get caught up on the words. See through the words. Iconic knowing. I say the word Christian. I say Christian. You hear person making. You hear good. You hear holy. You hear godly. You hear at one with the universe. Whatever words you need to hear to get that can awaken the meaning in you. It's not that I don't have opinions about the words and the proper words, but hear whatever you need to hear in a way that will orient you rightly in life, because that is the goal, right? We want people rightly oriented in life. So the internet can...
And that's a good way to say it. We want people rightly oriented in life. And if, in fact, life has a structure, if, in fact, being has a reality to it, there are right ways and wrong ways. And the goal of all of the religions and all of the models and all of that is what religion is, even beyond Christianity and Judaism and the universal for freedom religion that is the post-war religion that has captured America. Religion is trying to properly orient in life. Morality is deeply close and tied to that, but that is what this is about. And none of us get our religion right. We don't. We fall. None, because go, Luke, go. Luke was cooking.
Be used transactionally, but it doesn't have to be. This is what PBK was always saying, and maybe you'll get into this in your video. I've only watched the beginning parts of it, PBK, but we are trampling down the algorithm by the algorithm, which is why we're so confusing for people in the initial phases of their catechesis into the TLC. They're like, what the hell is this? We call it the steep slope, right? And then we have terms like on-ramping, because to figure out what the TLC is and to participate in it is difficult. And most people feel like they are, interestingly, kind of in a magical, strange, hard to figure out dreamland, fairyland. Like, what the hell is this? What are people doing? It was initially not intentional that way because it just emerged that way, but it's kind of intentional that way because that is part of it. You will not continue to participate in the TLC if you don't love what it's doing. And what I think and this will get into the telos and the end of online community. I believe, and I am acting in according to my belief, act as if, that the TLC really is about person making and making someone into whatever you want to call it, the highest ideal of what the human being should be, ought to be. like the Platonic form of the human being. I call that Christ, and then I call that Christ in me. Call it whatever you want, because you don't have to use my words. TLC is a place where you don't have to use my words, as Jordan Peterson said. No, so delusion. You can come in and tell me why I'm wrong about everything later, and I might reserve the right to still disagree with you. So I think the catechesis.
Okay, and I know people are going to listen to Luke and think it's perennialism. They're going to think all kinds of things about it. But Luke's making the point that when you understand what estuary is and what estuary means, this is what was asked Jonathan at Midwestuary, and I've played this before, and I'll play this again. I'll play it now, in fact.
Here, but this one is submitted to us from Matthew P. This is it. What is the spirit we are participating in a fellowship around? What is the spirit we are participating in a fellowship around?
Around what spirit are we fellowshipping?
Yeah, around what spirit are we fellowshipping?
I didn't have time to stop.
I think they mean here in this conference. That's my assumption.
I believe so.
And I don't remember who was talking about it, but I think it was in John's talk. Can we put language? There are many different reasons why people came. We know that. So there's a purpose question. And I think I can make hours of video on this. And you will. There's a lot of different reasons people came here. But I do, part of the reason, so I am in a estuary group, and as much as I can, I'm going to be there. And then I also ask what the other estuary groups are doing and talking about. And there are definitely patterns that are emerging. And again, Dan, Wagon Maker, who's part of the putting this thing together, said, most of the people who have come here have had some deconstruction in their life, and they are reconstructing. And I think all of us on stage, including Cale, that's true of us. The meaning crisis has affected us at one level or another, and we are in some process of putting lives back together and communities back together. And so when I listen to most of you out here, you have sensed that in this project, there is a degree of promise, maybe for yourself, maybe for your family, maybe for your church, maybe for your neighborhood, that when I leave here, I will leave here with something. It'll be hard to articulate what, but it won't just be that I'm a Vervaeke fanboy, or I'm a Peugeot fanboy, or boy, I got to see Rod Dreher and Elizabeth. I read all her stuff. It's not just that. I think people have a sense that whatever it is we are doing together is worthwhile and it's helping. Exactly how? Not sure, can point to things, but to me, that's what I see. And if
So, I mean, if you want to know what, let's say, type of spirit you're under, the first thing you do is you look at the name of the thing that you're participating in. So, 2 names. This little corner of the internet, and then second name, Estuary. So, clearly, those two names are referring to the fact that this is not a central community. This is not a church. You don't form a complete body like a family or like a company or a team. It is a marginal in-between place where, as Paul said, you're relearning the skills, reconnecting with people in order to go back to your actual real life communities and be able to participate in them more fully or more entrenched. And so I think that's the best way to understand what it is, because you wouldn't have names like that if it was more. And it's not, this is neither a criticism or a celebration. It's just, you can recognize what something is. And in some ways it's great, because if it was more than that, maybe it'd be a cult, right? Right? Exactly. And if it was like less than that, then maybe it would just be kind of an information conference. And it's neither of those extremes. It's something in between. And so I think it's the best way to recognize the spirit you're under, is to look at what's actually there. So.
I like to tell the story often of this woman. She's a real personal hero of mine, Camilla Bendova. She's quite old now. She was one of the leaders of the Czech resistance, the dissident movement against communism. Her husband went to prison for 4 years for it, but she was kind of the den mother. They met at the Benda family apartment. Václav Havel was there. All the top leaders were there. And I remember asking her when I interviewed her for Live Out My Lives, I said, you and your late husband were Catholics, but all of the people in the movement, in this fellowship of the ring that you had in your apartment, they were all atheists, hippies, none of them were Christians. I said, was that difficult for you and your husband? Because they were very conservative Catholics. She said, no, it wasn't at all, because we knew when we were standing up to communism, to totalitarianism, that the most important quality one needed was courage. She said, Rod, you mustn't think that our fellow Catholics had that courage. Almost all of them kept their heads down. They didn't want trouble. My husband and I felt, as Christians and just as human beings, we couldn't do that. We had to stand up. And if we were going to stand up, we needed a community to stand with. And we found it in Havel and all these hippies and atheists. And she went on to explain that. And we knew that if we got taken to jail, they would look after our kids and would raise them to understand the world they were in. And they knew they could trust us too. And I found that really interesting. And I think I tell the story now because I think it might apply to what's going on here. This is my first time at any Estuary event. And I've noticed that these rooms are full of people who don't all have the same religious faith or any religious faith at all. Maybe not the same political convictions. But what seems to unite folks is asking the same kinds of questions. And you can look to somebody who may not share your faith or anything else, but you can say, you too, you've seen this too. And I'd much rather, a million times rather, have a serious conversation with a seeker who has noticed the same problem, is awake to the same problem, and is working on finding ways through these problems in this crisis, than I would with someone at my church who ticks all the doctrinal boxes, but is oblivious and wishes to remain untroubled by the meaning crisis around them. And so that's the spirit I find here as a newbie, is a spirit of people who are awake. Dare I say it? Steal back the word. We're Vanderbilt.
That's probably an actual last name. I'm not done.
Yeah, oh, okay.
I mean, I'll jump for a second, why not? I think the spirit is fellowship. You can sort of read it either way. It's the fellowship that is galvanized or catalyzed by a spirit, but it's the spirit that is being catalyzed is friendship. And I'm not just trying to be cute about that, but I believe, Neil, I remember meeting you for the first time in southern Massachusetts with Paul and that estuary. And remember you said, I reached out to Chad because I just kind of knew that Chad was supposed to be my friend. And it was that. And it's sort of in its initial simplicity, and then of course all the complexity that follows from that. But it's friendship. It's, and John, you were speaking earlier about the struggles of your students and even your son, and the friendship is exactly what we're longing for: friendship, relationship, these kinds of things. And for whatever reason, many of us feel sort of thrown, and who do we turn to? What do we turn to? Well, a friend is precisely the kind of thing that regrounds you. And when you were talking about, Elizabeth, that you're not even just you, you're only you because you have an other who can confirm you as a you. And so to me, the Spirit is friendship, but fellowship is what we're after here.
This doesn't mean I don't want to make Christians. Of course I want to make Christians. Why? Because for me, as for Luke, Christians are, that's what I understand the ideal to be, who is Christ. Estuary is not a church. I was thinking about how Estuary, like the Anglicans are in some ways, they're sort of this, but there's always those kinds of boundary areas and places of transformations and passages. But as Jonathan Peugeot said, if you want to know what something is, why don't you start looking at the name? The TLC and Estuary are not themselves in many ways destinations, but they are places that we have in order to help us get to a destination. And people are going to have different destinations. So in my conversation with Sam, which was in August of 2020 that I played in the video that I released this morning, which when you hear this will be yesterday, I said exactly the same thing that I'm saying now, which is I understand the aspects of pluralism that we are sort of enmeshed in with respect to this, and we are in some ways stuck with them. And I wanted something, I knew full well that even that my Jordan Peterson meetup, then which evolves into Estuary, by no means was everyone who comes through that going to become a Christian or become a member of the Christian Reformed Church or become a member of Living Stones. Some will never do that in this life. And you know what? Again, I'm a Calvinist. I'm okay with that. I give these things to God. I am not in charge of them. I do not have the power. I am called in the beginning of the book of Acts, and you will be the power of the Holy Spirit will come upon you, and you will be my witnesses. And so my job is to be a witness. But I cannot transform hearts. I cannot change hearts. I cannot. And in fact, me as a liberal, because of course Calvinism also creates liberalism, is that I am going to love you and respect you, even if you say you don't like my Jesus or you don't like my church or you don't like Christianity, any of those things, because Christians are called to love their neighbor all the way up to and including their enemies. So even if you make yourself an enemy of Christ and you are a flesh with human being, demons, that's a different story. We battle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities and powers. So if you are of flesh and blood, I am called to love you. That is my charge. Now, the TLC is a really weird place. And I want to play more of Luke's video, and I will. But this video that Matt C. made a while ago, TLC as Horticulture, was an outstanding video. The link is below it. I won't play the whole video, but I'll play a good part of it.
One of the curious things about TLC is this is the only community I've ever seen. This is kind of where we're gonna start to connect this in a creative way. Hopefully you enjoy this. You find this edifying. One of the things about TLC is this is the only community that I've seen. It's the only community that where nobody's minds are being changed by anything. anything that you would expect in an IRL situation that is we're talking about core foundationally held beliefs. That's the sort of stuff that grows subsurface. That's a soil, that's a root system question, people's foundational beliefs. And just starting with me, I may be a Calvinist. There's just as many Calvinists in this quarter as there were when I showed up 3 years ago, right? Sam Tiedemann, Unitarian, works really hard to convince people of Unitarianism. Pretty sure he's still the only Unitarian. He's been around longer than I have. Another person, Luke Thompson. He's probably spent 100 hours trying to convince people of universalism. He's probably spent another 100 hours trying to get people to abandon confessionalism. And I think he's still at goose egg. I think he's of all the content I've seen a lot of those 100 hours. I don't think anybody's convinced except the people who were already convinced before they found him. So I want you to think about that. What does that mean when you have a corner of the internet that appears uniquely healthy? We're profoundly, I would say, attracted to what people are doing and thinking and how they're governing their lives. It starts to look like this, right? It starts to look like a healthy, rightly oriented approach towards ecosystem development, but it's happening online. But if nobody's changing their minds, does that mean that Luke Thompson is failing, despite all his efforts at trying to convert people to his belief system, or Sam Tiedemann being unable to convert anyone to Unitarianism, or myself? The times I've been lured into discussing my own beliefs, I've never seen anyone change, even budge. How about there's another one, Jacob Federici. I'm just calling out all the names today. This is the way how you get videos shared, right? You have to do some call outs, or it's not really it's not a good drama video. Jacob Federici can't even convince Paul Vanderklay to start a business, much less become a Noahide, right? He can't even get him to throw a large conference under his own LLC. The people that he wasn't focused on did that for him. That would make TLC uniquely. Let's write a little bit here. Uniquely. Does that make it uniquely dysfunctional? Because no one can convince each other of anything? I would suggest it's a sign of health. It's a sign that this is where we start to land the plane, okay? We've been at 30,000 feet for the past 5 or 6 minutes. We're going to start to descend. So everybody, make sure your trays are in their upright and locked position. That would be your seats, wouldn't it? Anyway, you understand the rest of that metaphor. We're descending beneath the cloud line now. We have the airstrip in view. We're going to make sure that the plane isn't strewn across the tarmac here, okay? But if TLC is actually functioning in this fundamentally dysfunctional zone of the internet, the only way that works is if the people's root systems are actually IRL in soil. That's why there's an outsized preponderance of people who seem like upright citizens seem like great family men and women who seem like healthy, wise, responsible, caring individuals, like Sam Tiedemann, like Luke Thompson, dare I say it, like Jacob Federici, and like Paul Vanderklay. Their soil isn't online. They don't have their exposed root system in Palantir ISO orbs. Okay, in a zero-G environment, some sort of Elon Musk, transport tube to Mars. Like, they're actually growing themselves in real soil. And what people have done, despite themselves sometimes, because I recognize I'm cutting a promo against people who have been here longer than I have. Despite the fact that a lot of people, a lot of the old heads, old timers in this corner, are very attracted towards trying to convert each other. They're really bad at it because everybody is in right relationship where they're just sticking their foliage and their flowers in each other's faces. And we're actually here enjoying and smelling each other's roses is what we've been doing. And we've been enjoying the health and the manifold, pluripotent, ecological diversity that does happen when you have great soil and you have great input growing, and we are indirectly feeding each other's root systems and growing healthy plants with each other, interdependently. And it's beautiful. But a flower can't get at your roots. If the flower is rightly rooted, if all the, you know what I'm saying? Like the stuff above ground actually can't get at each other's things underground. It can in this kind of horror, like transhumanist, cyborg dystopian horror show that we're getting here. Who knows what monstrosities can happen if these plants are, this is already such a horribly exposed, like if we're already growing roots in environments that don't need roots. So if you're already exposing your profoundly held beliefs to the internet, you've already, not only you're already not going to make it, you've already lost. You're already a transhumanist. You need to log off now, and before the grass that you need to be touching is out of your reach. But you can actually affect each other's deeply held beliefs. You can go to Christian YouTube and watch people convert each other all day. You can go to what's his name? The guy who writes for Sam Hyde. So the one guy I can't call out who actually would give me some drama. You can go to Ortho Bro YouTube and watch. You can watch people just ridicule each other and bully each other into converting into all kinds of things, and all kinds of truth and non-truth. And a lot of those people are probably sociopaths. They probably have clinical amounts of clinical inabilities to sympathize with people because their root systems are exposed, because they're actually growing their roots in space instead of in soil. Okay, that's a fundamental dysfunction of roots, is if you can see the roots, if the roots are out of the soil. And the internet's trying to convince you that you should expose your roots, and you shouldn't. So that, my friends, that is why TLC is uniquely good. And that's why I'm never gonna convince any of you to become a Calvinist or a Unitarian or a Universalist, because your root systems are exposed. Because I'm just enjoying the sweet smelling produce of what's happening beneath the soil offline is really what's happening. And we might all be thrusting each other's our own flowery presences into each other's lives kind of virtually, and I celebrate that. I think that's one of the beautiful things about what's happening here.
All right, let's cook some more with Luke.
The TLC is this. It's a place, here we go. It's a place where it's not colonizing. We can disagree. See here, Grim, maybe, I don't know who he's talking about. He's maybe talking to me. He's maybe talking to Chezi. Grim may disagree with me. Okay, that's your right to do so. I reserve the right to continue disagreeing. And that's good. That's good. I may learn something with humility. Either he or I or both of us may, in our disagreement, this is oppositional processing, may learn to come and see something differently than we used to see it. We may realize we have the wrong optimal grip on our narrative maps of the universe, and we may stop crushing the can that we're trying to hold the drink out of. That may happen, but that requires humility too. Okay, catechesis of the TLC. I'm back. The Randos was the initial thing. So PVK made the Jordan Peterson video. All these people, it popped up on their algorithm. All these people reached out to him, started watching him, and said, oh, I want to talk to you about my life experiences. That was the emergence of the Rando. Annie Crawford just did one yesterday. It's going to be released to the PVK's larger channel at some point. It was excellent. Chef's kiss. Good job, PVK and Annie. She was vulnerable, transparent, tragically beautiful story. It's wonderful Randos.
And Annie is now. There's some Christian. Let's talk about the antithesis a little bit, because that's going to come up a little while with, again, back to the John Sook video. Because, well, some people. So the antithesis: good, bad, right, wrong, black, white, on, off. This is an aspect of reality that can't be denied. It's just part of it. And when people try to always deny it, they wind up initiating it. Like, people are like, all is one. Well, what if I don't believe that? Well, you should believe that. Well, you've just initiated the antithesis. You cannot get rid of the antithesis. And some Christians and some communities in Christianity are more antithetical. Other communities in Christianity are less antithetical, and they're a little bit more open. But the thing is, you go all the way to open and you will trigger the antithesis. And you get very antithetical and you become all the way down to just you. You become a solipsist. So Annie tends to be a little bit more on the antithetical part. And you can hear that in her story, and she'll tell you, she'll say, look, I got to a point in my life and I needed truth. I needed Jesus. I needed a church with real lines, and I needed these things. But she's in an Anglicanism, which isn't terribly antithetical in some ways. Parts of it are. So the antithesis, and it's always something that you have to deal with. And I know many people who tend to be towards openness or the left or perennialism, they get allergic to the antithesis. And so then they say, everything's good except the antithesis. And it's like, there it is again. You cannot get away from it. It's simply part of existence. So I counsel people to make your peace with the antithesis and with the antitheticals. Jacob's Corner is, Jacob has a video today that says Ben Shapiro destroys Nick Fuentes with facts and logic. And Jacob will tell you very directly, he is not part of the corner. And Jacob has fired me many times, but Jacob and I remain friends because I love antithetical people. I do. Why? Because they have beliefs and they hold to them, and they're very smart, and you can learn from the antithesis. The antithesis can be a wonderful thing. And again, if you understand when Jonathan Peugeot talks about the center and the fringe, Jacob's channel remains at the fringe of the TLC in some ways. Today, there's a podcast talking all politics. You know, I was on there, Sam was on there, Rod Hare was in the comments section. you know, it's in some ways at the fringe, but it's a really important part of the entire system. And we had a wonderful conversation about Trump, and then they were going to AI, and it's Jacob. But you have to make your peace with the antithesis because it is part of reality, and it has its place, and its affordances in reality. Let's see, what was it gonna? I already played the Matt thing. Okay, more Luke. Here's the catechesis.
People can come in through the PVK pipeline. They can come in through Peugeot. They can come through Vervaeke. But really, what it's about is initiation and participation. Because like Mark Lefebvre and Mathieu Peugeot talked about this in the video that I clipped yesterday. Participatory knowing, in some way, is kind of one of the central ways of knowing. You don't know anything through initiation. Like procedure is also part of participatory because you participate in procedures. Propositional is also part of participatory because you use the certain words, the certain language, the certain confessions, the certain creeds, on-ramp, steep slope, randos. What do all these words mean? You won't know until you participate. And that's inevitable. That happens in any community. Like go to like a math group, go to a philosophy group, go to a mom's group, go to an engineering group, go to a landscaping group, go to any group, a bunch of milkers, go to a dairy farm. They're going to have particular language that you won't understand until you've participated in them. Learn a new language. You will not understand it until you've participated in it. Like you can't understand from outside, not fully because you don't know it enough. It is not in and outside.
I remember when I was doing language training for missionary work, one of the things that they'd often say is you probably haven't gotten very far until you start dreaming in your second language. Because Luke is exactly right. You don't want to run a translator in your head between English and, in my case, it was Spanish. You want to live in Spanish, and your reactions ought to be in Spanish. And that's why after enough time in the Dominican Republic, I would instinctively respond to people just with Spanish rather than, oh, I want to say it in English, but they speak Spanish, so I have to do it this way. And so you do have the translating circuits, but the goal is I was in some ways a different person in the Dominican Republic because I was living in that Spanish language.
Side of you. So you have to participate. And so then what will happen is people will they maybe just think this is just YouTube content, right? And it is that, but it's also more than that, right? So people will start watching videos and then they'll be like, I don't know. They'll either be like, this is dumb, go away. Or they'll be like, there's something here that's interesting. Keep forgetting the new guy who was in here yesterday.
Matthew.
He came onto my streams a few times. He has the handlebar mustache.
Luke's crowning disciple. He came in directly through Luke, and he loved what Luke was doing, and he forgets his name. Come on, Matthew.
Cool dude. Anyhow, he didn't come in through PVK. I think he just saw one of my streams, and then I said, break the fourth wall. Grim, see, this is a community. That's Grim's term, right? Which means you stop just watching the silver screen, and you click the link, and you come on screen, and you join a live stream, and you're like, oh man, this is weird. I was just watching this as a non-player, as just a, consumer of it. And all of a sudden now I'm engaging in it. That's called breaking the fourth wall. That may be a way of your initiation into the TLC. You'll maybe just start leaving comments on videos. All of these are different forms and avenues into various spheres of the TLC. And then maybe at some point you get a randos with PVK. There's also hierarchies. Hierarchies bind and blind, and they're inevitable. You can't help it, So PVK said this in his conversation with Annie. It's basically like small groups. He knew, somewhat, he's a pastor of this group. It's not a church. And PVK explicitly says that it's not a church, but it's like a church. And he's a pastor, so he uses his pastoral gifts in the TLC.
And that's a great example because I see it through a church model because that's a model I know well. other people are seeing the church, the TLC through other models because those are models they know well. We're not seeing the thing directly, but we have to see it through these models. I saw a rando I did with Carl. Carl was active for a while here, and then he got mad at me when I made a video about Ukraine. And then, you know, he every now and then he sneaks in and leaves a comment, but for the most part he doesn't. But he was talking about Donald Hoffman, the guy with the beetle bottle thing. He was big a few years ago in this thing, and you know, Carl was saying, there's, you know, he had this great illustration of moving a sensory deprivation tank slowly so you couldn't feel it inside. I thought it was a great illustration. It's in the Randos conversations that I'm playing on this other channel. But we see what we see through models.
He'll say like, okay, so then we have small groups. There's little communities of people. And then there's leaders that you see. And he encourages certain leaders, the people that he's friends with and trusts, and highlights them, and then doesn't other leaders. You know, that's what happens. And then there's this flotilla of channels. Again, another propositional word that Grimm coined. Grimm has coined many of these. And there's these different loosely associated group of people that's complete.
And the different people have different functions. Again, I see it in church terms. They have different gifts. They have different functions. Grim Grizz is this mimetic genius that keeps giving us gifts like flotilla and homeroom, and he just spins out these gifts, and we take them and we integrate them into the community, and Luke has his gifts, and Sam has his gifts, and Rod has his gifts, and Dr. Jim has his gifts, and we all have these different gifts, and it all goes to become a part of this one shared thing. I don't own it. I don't want to own it. I want to participate in it. I want to give to it. It's much more of a commons and a collective that we are contributing and building together.
Voluntary. You can participate to whatever degree you want, and you can leave whatever you want. We are not a cult because you can just go ahead and leave. You know, it's just the way it is. But like all of those things are part of the catechesis of the TLC, and people participate to varying degrees based on what they want and what they need. And I believe that this is person making, that this is good, that this is helping people, or else I wouldn't do it. Or I'm self-deluded and this is a cope. You know, people accuse me of that all the time, or say, not accuse, or they just say it's possible. MJ being one of the primary ones.
And we all have our copes.
And you know, whatever, he can say that if he wants. And then I say, okay, well, then why are you here? Because are you just being a savior? You're saving me from myself? Okay, thank you. But also, I mean, your intention is good. That's great. Also, no, thank you, because I'm aware of your criticism. I've heard it many, many times. I'm engaged with it a lot of times. I've been open to it. I don't think it's true. And so at the end of the day, again, I reserve the right to disagree with you. And also, yeah, why can't it be bull? I'm sure none of us are perfect human beings. I'm sure we are all driven by a combination of good and bad intentions. I'm not saying that that I never use TLC as a cope, and that I don't just do a live stream or engage in a chat in Signal or whatever when I should be doing something else. Of course I do. You know, I'm not claiming to be perfect, but here's the thing. The people who, as PBK said in my last live stream, and this is very true, a lot of the success stories of the TLC you don't see, because people were here and they were participating, and then they cleaned their room, they sorted their life out, they found spouses, they got married, and then they're living very full embodied lives in their local communities, and so they don't have time and space for this to the same degree. And
they don't need this right now. And it doesn't mean they've become super people or anything, but they sort of used it to sort of clean up something in their life that helped them get to another place where, no, they don't use it. And those of us who sort of stay here, and this is kind of the the trick of, you go back to this idea of, like everyone should become a minister, that ministers at the top of the hierarchy. No. The goal of AA is not to make sponsors. Now, you're going to need a lot of sponsors to have AA work. But the goal of AA is not to make sponsors. The goal of AA is to help people become people who are no longer burdened by the kind of addiction that had been burdening them. And some people will stay and continue to work in AA to maintain the program, but the vast majority will pass through and go on to something else. And that's how it should be. And the church is the same way. Not everyone is called, and it's what Apostle Paul says, not everyone is called to be preachers or apostles or teachers, but you can spread that out over the panoply of different things that we do. And of course, many of us do many things, but the point of this is not to somehow create an enormous edifice. The point is to create a space where we can help each other do whatever it is we need to do now. And, I have looked at some people, and there are some people outside of my life in this that I think you could stand some TLC time. You could stand to get to know Luke Thompson. You could do much worse than becoming friends with Luke Thompson or Chad or even Jacob. Jacob is a wonderful friend. Jacob has amazing gifts of friendship and support. He really does. And so, but they may never come here, and someone might be here for a little while and then go. And churches are kind of like that too in some ways. And Livingstone's has long been a place like that, where people come here for a little while and they go on to sometimes another church that suits them better. They go on, maybe they move to another part of the country and I lose track of them. I don't know. But a lot of the work that we're doing is like, well, if this is what you really enjoy doing, like Luke clearly does, because no one just sort of sets up a YouTube channel until they get a vision. Karen Wong was talking about it. She was like, what should I do? I said, set up a YouTube channel. And Karen Wong has done wonderful things with the Meaning Code.
For me, it's the same way. Like I didn't come to TLC really needing to sort my life out a ton. It has helped in a lot of those regards because because I'm the kind of person that externally needs to process and engage with people and dialogue about it. I've always been that way. That's something that Annie Crawford said in her Randos, that she was trying to process some of this stuff in a church and it just wasn't being helpful. And so she eventually had to leave. That's what happened to me in my move toward orthodoxy. I have no delusions, though, that if I try.
And as the thing with Sam, churches struggle with helping people process certain things. It's why there are therapists and why pastors will sometimes send someone to a therapist. But part of the reason I wanted Estuary is because I knew that some of these things we could only process church adjacently. Because once you come under the covering of the church, under the authority of the church, different rules apply necessarily because it's a church. It is doing different things from Estuary or the TLC. We have slightly different goals. Now, I can see the utility of Estuary for a church for many of its goals because I know what it's like to be in a church and I know what churches are supposed to do. But, we bless the world with Estuary as best we can and hopefully with the TLC. And people will come through with lots of different ideas and they'll go different ways with it.
I had to process a lot of this stuff in my local Orthodox church. It wouldn't be good. It would not be generative, which is why I don't do it. I mean, there are things that I would say, I'm sure, and there are things that I would think that would unsettle people. And so that's fine. It's like Peugeot said, like the 90-year-old grandma in the front row of his church. You don't go up to her and start talking to her about symbolism. It's not going to be helpful for her. This is applied information, properly applied information, and is wisdom, right? It's the difference between information and meaning. One of the differences. Again, watch that Mathieu Peugeot and Mark Lefebvre Navigating Patterns video. It was great on that. Or watch my live stream from yesterday. So I'm here because I think it's good for me. But then here's the thing. I'm doing this quickly. I'll probably open it up for a little bit. This is probably going to last less than an hour. And then I have other things to do with my day that I'm going to be doing. Will I maybe listen to videos passively, kind of like radio? Because here's the thing, like radio. Is radio distracting you from the fullness of participating in your life? Are perhaps audiobooks, are whatever? Like where do part of this to me is like is a very part of people's hesitancy with the internet or TLC or whatever is a kind of close-minded hyper conservatism that I just don't resonate with. Like being conservative and liberal isn't good or bad, you know. Chesterton's Fence, Chesterton's Democracy of the Dead, all that kind of stuff. Chesterton was probably way too liberal for most temperamentally conservative liberal or conservatives, if I'm honest. But it's not a good or bad thing, but it's just like conservatives by their nature hate new things. Like this is the Peugeot when he said the conservative fears the chimera and the liberal fears the kind of inbred hillbilly archetype, you know? That's true. I think that's true. The internet is new, and so we don't know what to think about it. We don't know wisdom about it. It's novel, and so it weirds people out. New things don't weird me out. The inbred, I'm very much a temperamentally liberal person. I don't mean that morally. Morally, I'm pretty, and ethically and culturally, I'm fairly conservative in a lot of ways. But I'm also an anarchist, so that looks weird. Like I don't, in as much as it, I think you should intervene you should intervene at large scales and probably even with yourself to a minimum necessary force. I mean, that's a tenet of like, I suppose it's nonviolence or self-defense or just war or something. Minimum necessary force. But that's true in any sort of intervention, because in PBK, actually, he said this in that Sam video that he was playing at the tail end of his current homeroom live stream. But he said something like that is a lot of what we're dealing with in the modern world is trying to fix the problems, ameliorate the problems that we created through our previous interventions. Totally think that's true. A lot of what's wrong in modern cities and urban planning is because we've built cities in America, at least around the automobile. So we invented the automobile and we're like, isn't this great? Look at all this freedom it will give us. And then boom, there's all these negative downstream consequences. Almost everything is that way. All right. So let me wrap this up and open it up for a little bit. PLC definitely has a catechesis. And what is the end of online community? I would say, like everything, it's both things. It's the ideal good and the bad. It's God, mammon, Christ, antichrist, the real, the deceptive counterfeit, art, artifice. You know, that's how everything works. And so good online community that's led by wise persons that are leading by example and taking the log out of their own eye and having the humility to learn and who are not exalting themselves and sitting at the lowest place, that kind of community, online or offline, will breed good fruit. I think that's true. Not necessarily without hardship, but it will lead to good fruit. I also want to talk about this. Sorry, Rod, if I'm putting you on blast, but so PBK in his video said, I think he said the goal. So here's where you have to have a little good faith with the language that people use, which I was mentioning a few times in here. Rod said, because early on in PBK's homeroom, PBK said that the goal of, and he said this at different times, the goal of, and I think PBK has evolved in this, the goal of Estuary or the goal of our online community is to create Christians. But what PBK means by that, again, we're still trapped in propositional tyranny and ideology. I don't think what PBK means is exactly self-identifying Christians. I think he does mean that. I think what PBK means by Christians, again, is good, healthy people. People that are well fitted to navigate the life in a way that comports with reality, with what is, with the good. And like, and at some point you're going to have to define things in like religious categories for that, because you can't, I mean, you're not going to get there on just like this broad universal assumption of the secular good. Because what is the good? What do you mean by that? At what scale? At what rate? How do you define the good? How do you understand the good? That's all PVK means. People who fall away. I mean, whatever you want to call it. Once you see the way broadly, you'll see it in everything. Okay. I'll open it up for people to come and play a little bit. I am going.
All right. I'm not going to stay with all of it. Nathan comes in. A lot of good conversation with Nathan. Others jump in. A lot of good conversation with them too. I really want to sort of get all the way out to Paul Allen's, because I thought he made some excellent points.
That inherent to me. It doesn't matter if I become a famous behavioral economist and make $1 million off the ideas here, but exactly.
Well.
It's like you surveyed 1,000 people in the year 1960, and you're like, "What's your thoughts on today?" But like, they don't have valid for people to say, "But I do want to spend my time here, even in light of criticism."
All right, let's welcome Paul. See what Paul has to say.
Hopefully not too much. Has anyone read Neil Stephenson's Anathema? No takers. All right. So basically the core of the plot is there's this sort of community of academic monks, and they are participating in this intellectual exercise as a community, and it becomes their way of life, and adventures ensue. But I think there's, how are we different than the computer group?
Maybe I'll bring in my tweet then at this point, because Nathan said, well, we're kind of like a computer group, and well, there's truth to that. Let's see, I pinned this. Let's get the whole thing. And I started. Sometimes in the morning I'll get an idea for a video, but I don't have time to do it. And so then I'll just make a Twitter thread. The tensions within one's American founding Calvinism. Calvinism gives birth to and is highly antithetical. Someone in the live chat said, PBK, he says he's a Calvinist, but he listens. And the Calvinists he's used to hearing are all combative, like Mark Wilson or Mark Driscoll or Doug Wilson. Mark Driscoll used to identify as a Calvinist, not anymore. Tim Keller, Mr. Winsome, he was a Calvinist too. And I'm going to get into, Calvinism is deeply tied to the religious evolutions in colonial New England, as Sam Tiedemann had made the point. Sometimes people ask, what work does TLC do? I say lots of work. We do people work. We do thinky-talky work. We do pastoral care. We do pre-evangelism, sort of, and all these kind of things. I'm going to bring in the John Sook video too. People come to the TLC with agendas. Some want to have a community without the supernatural stuff. Some want to make people orthodox, big O orthodox. Some want to make friends. More women out there need to find a husband, because we got a lot of single dudes here that could use a good wife. We are sort of just like, are we sort of just like the old internet interest group, like Nathan Digital Gnosis says? It's true, but it's sort of like saying my marriage is like every other marriage and my wife is like every other wife. But in me, it's like, well, not to me. Person Pod keeps reminding us personalism is deep in this tribe. That's why for many of us, the thingness of the TLC isn't as important as the relationships. That's actually a very Protestant thing. For Protestants, often the thingness of the church isn't the thing by itself. It is there to facilitate the relationships, because the relationality is more real than a lot of the things we tend to be able to see and value in the economy of the world. After the Jesus movement, you have this whole thing, well, do you have a personal relationship with Jesus Christ? The relationship is emphasized. Jesus says, a new commandment I give you, that you love one another. It's the quality of the relationship that you have with each other, which will itself be the witness of Jesus out there. Not simply a list of the commandments or the propositions that are true of Jesus. It's the quality of the relationship. And I think that has gotten deeply into American culture. And I think Rod Hare exemplifies that, because if there's anything, poor Rod, he's in this video all up and down it. But if there's anything that Rod is skilled at and brings to the corner, it's, if you've ever seen Rod sort of do his thing, I've got our Nuance Forum conversation in this 20 days of videos, 20 days and counting. I'm going to add more to it too. But Rod is expert at figuring out relationality and having satisfying conversations back and forth and having good relationships with each other. I clipped part of my randos with Annie Crawford yesterday in a great conversation. Annie's an Anglican, and there's an estuary quality Anglicanism, really. And a lot of people are like, Annie, when are you going to become Roman Catholic? When are you going to become Orthodox? But she's got a well of relationships around her that she has to maintain, and that goes then into, in a very metagelical way, the church that works for not only her, but her whole family. This is part of the Protestantization happening to Orthodoxy in America, as it's been happening to the Roman Catholics. Now, I will say that part of this is older than Martin Luther and the Protestant Reformation. It has always been part of the church by way of Jesus and the unauthorized exorcist in Mark 9. Jesus' disciples see someone else, not of their circle, casting out demons in Jesus' name. And the disciples are like, shall we get him, Jesus? And Jesus says, leave him alone. If he's not against us, he's for us. But as I made the point with Brian Sartori today, Jesus says a lot of those things like Proverbs. If you're not for us, you're against us. And then he'll say, if you're not against us, you're for us. And it's like, well, Jesus says, yes. You just have to figure out with wisdom when, what, how, why. How does that work? Lots of Orthodox that I've met get that. Some lean hard into the antithesis. I get that too. Why? Because lots of my Calvinist friends do the same thing. The antithesis is always part of reality. There's digital on and off. Then there's analog. None of us get to see all things, and therefore we are lousy judges, and that's exactly what Jesus says. I've noticed that many people want to get onto my channel because they wanted to promote an internet thing. And I found this with these Randos conversations that are running. They had this thing, and I had a little bigger channel than them, and they could easily sign up for a Randos back in those days because the channel was smaller, and they get on and they promote their thing or they promote their book, and that's all fine. It's fine for that. But what I've noticed is that many of those things that they were promoting are no longer with us, even though they had organization and structure and all of those things that everybody wanted the TLC to have at first, very early on. This is something that I learned from church planting, is that it's sort of like an animal with an exoskeleton. You should grow, and you should grow to the point that the organization and the institutionalizing serves the next stage. But sometimes you grow an exoskeleton and you're going to have to molt. And sometimes you can't molt and you die in that exoskeleton. And so we saw with church planting all the time that it was, we would always try to have basically just-in-time organization. Now, there's some things that definitely could have helped the TLC grow more quickly. Looking back over these old videos, I can rethink about, okay, should we have done that? Would more structure, more organization, a few more resources here and there? Sure. But on the whole, you never know. Because just like when I'm playing with these 24/7 live streams, you just don't know what's going to happen with them. So you try stuff and then you see what happens and you'll work through it. So on the whole, I'm very glad with the way that the thing has developed, and especially the way that Estuary has grown. It's partly because I'm such a rut person. I like doing what I'm doing. Yes, will it last beyond me making homeroom videos? Grim Grizz said in the live chat that homeroom thing that Grim coined, that's done a lot of work, a lot of good work for us. And that's part of Griswold Grimm's gift to this broader community. If something happened to me, would it center around Luke or Sam or maybe Corey and the Estuary group or Nate or maybe Rod would create something. He would revive Nuance Forum and kind of come around the TLC. I've always wanted the thing so that other things could grow around it and be connected to it. Maybe even outgrow it and grow large. I mean, we've yet to have a YouTube channel in our midst sort of really take off, although some people have had in other social media things. Paul Anleitner has, really made some things, and he's sort of adjacent to us. But he's, if you go back over these Randos conversations, lots of conversations with Paul Anleitner. Maybe Rod Hare would pick up the mantle and do more secular things rather than religious. I don't know. But this is how things work in this world. We see the institutions, the status of people today, and they draw all the attention. But the deep things that really shape the world are communities. They might not be terribly well defined. One of the TLC awareness obsessions is that of a thing. Of course it's a thing. Will it become a thing enough that important people will notice it? Will it be written in history books? I don't know, of course. Part of us naturally longs for that significance. But this is, of course, for me, where the Christian thing comes in, because finally, I am judged by an audience of one. Whatever anybody thinks of the TLC, everybody's entitled to their own opinion, but finally, it's what God thinks of my work that finally matters. Now, that's tricky because that word God is really tricky. But for me, of course, the God of Christianity, the God of the Bible, on Judgment Day, part of my evaluation will be, what did you do with these gifts? And I will point to the TLC, and I'll say, that's part of what I've done. Estuary is part of what I've done. Living Stones is part of what I've done. My missionary work is part of what I've done. My children, my family, my marriage, how I've taken care of my body, all of this will be evaluated, and I'll be judged. That's the way the Bible says it's supposed to go. Now I'm going to add 5 years ago I usually don't go out, and people find me, but I went out because I wanted to talk to John Sook. John Sook is a rather famous example in the Christian Reformed Church of someone who sort of traveled to the height of the denomination and then left it all. And he left it all because he didn't believe in the divinity of Christ. He's sort of a weak theist, he'll say. He's not sure about God. And he left the Christian Reformed Church and began to pastor a church in the United Church of Canada, where you can be an atheist. You can be all these things. And he explains what this is about. And I was very interested in this because, okay, what does it mean to pastor a church, a Christian church, where, you don't believe all these Christian things?
I'm good at preaching, and I'm a good pastor, and I know how to bring people together within a congregational setting. And so for me, it was never about losing my ideals for being a minister. It was about changing my mind about how to minister and what to say as a minister. I was Peter Wyatt was my entry into the United Church of Canada. He was the principal of Emmanuel College, which was a sister school of the Institute for Christian Studies. That's a seminary for the United Church. And he was listening to me one day, and he said, "John, you're just in the wrong denomination. We have room for you. You can do all that stuff with us," which is eventually what happened. I'm not crazy about denominations. I have suggested to friends and colleagues in the United Church that we ought to pay more attention to our congregational roots and less attention to the denomination. The United Church is known for having a hierarchy that's very rigid and old-fashioned and slow, where things happen slowly. It's definitely not a case of the grass being greener on the other side of the fence when it comes to the administration of the denomination over here compared to there. But you have to understand that when I said to this calling committee from the congregation where I now serve that I'm not sure of Jesus' divinity, and I often struggle to believe in God, and I believe that, and so on and so forth. They said, "You're our guy." So I had to ask them, like, what convinced you finally? And they said, well, for the last 5 years, our previous minister, Ken Gallinger, he's been preaching post-theism. You're kind of conservative compared to him. So, but, I say that with a great deal of appreciation for Ken Gallinger. And, he led this church through some difficult times, and he left behind him a thinking congregation that was really more into how to be Christian, especially as well-to-do upper crust kind of people for the most part, who were getting older and getting on. They want to know how to be Christian in a way that would have made Jesus smile. And so that's what we focus on, and we don't worry about doctrine. They say, that's your hobby, go do it, We don't worry about doctrine, that is, as the standards of the church. We have a creed here in the United Church, whose name I forget because I only use it during the Lord's Supper, but the last line has something about Jesus and judging, and I just drop it from the creed. The rest is really nice, but I don't believe in Jesus judging. That's a nice idea and all that, but for other people, not for me. No one has even noticed, because that's not what they're into. They're not into splicing the doctrine. They're interested in very practical Christianity for people in their situation, and that's a challenge I can preach to and pastor to. So I love being a minister. I guess I'm kind of like your dad that way. Although I'm getting to the end of my career, I'm getting close to retirement. There's other stuff I'd like to do too. Yeah. It's not a rejection of being a minister. It's more like I have only a limited number of years, and so I want to finish those other things on my career bucket list too.
So practical Christianity for people in their situation. Again, my fascination is, what do they mean by practical Christianity? I mean, who is Jesus to them? And I mean, that just fascinates me. And I think part of the reason I wanted to understand you, I wanted to talk to you, is because unlike many of the people that I talk to, you have a pretty good understanding of at least where I come from in some respects, being the context of the Christian Reformed Church.
Mm-hmm. So how in the Heidelberg Catechism, the 10 Commandments section is not written merely as a list of thou shalt nots.
Right. It's
written rather as a series of suggestions for how people can live out of gratitude. Yeah. In a way that fulfills especially the second of the two great commandments, to love your neighbor. And in a sense, I've always thought that section of the Heidelberg Catechism is an argument for keeping the first commandment. In this sense, you keep the first commandment to love God when you love your neighbor. Mm-hmm. That's what, visiting the person in prison is about. That's what giving him or her the coat off your back is about. Feeding them, giving them a drink of water. That's loving God, loving Jesus. So what people in my church want to know is how to live like that, given all the complexities of their own lives. They have had their hands, or do have their hands, as presidents and vice presidents of Canadian banks, for example, on the levers of power, but they are hiring managers, they are stockbrokers, they are captains of industry. And these are people who, for whatever mysterious reason in their own past, they come to church and they're asking this question: how can I do this job as a Christian? How do systems impact what I do? Is it just about the stock owners and profit, or do my hiring decisions or purchasing decisions or investment decisions have a greater impact and more meaning than just making profit for stockholders? They want to know how to live out of gratitude for the opportunity to live, for the opportunity to experience love, for the opportunity to make a difference for someone else. And what Jesus is for them and what he is for me is a person in the ancient past who, one of the first people, not the only one, but one of the first people and his followers to get it, that it's about the neighbor, and it's about living in gratitude, and it's about making life good for yourself by being good to everyone else, about that deeper sense of accomplishment and joy that living such a life is. Some people say to me, well, what do you need a church for that? You could belong to the Rotary Club and get the same thing. And the truth is, they're absolutely right. I belonged to Toronto's biggest Rotary Club for years. And, you know, we opened with a secular prayer, kind of like what I do now. And we had committees for outreach, and we had a sermon, a talk and we did it over a meal, communion. And sure, what I do looks a lot like the Rotary Club. But so what? They're both great. Plus, at church, you get the added benefit of a group of people who is more focused inwardly on doing it for each other, as well as just generally doing it for the rest of the world. Like a Rotary Club has all these charitable activities that we can for others. But in a church, you're building a family. You're building a relief and love group amongst people you can count on. And you're doing it still inspired by the great example of Jesus.
I want to be really careful here, because what I really don't want to do is what I know a lot of people want me to do.
Sure, take off my head.
that I will not do. But you know what? And see, I have to ask this question, but people are going to hear this question like, "Oh, conservative churches have a bright and shining future, whereas the vestiges of the liberal mainline are sinking like a stone." The problem with that equation isn't that. The problem with that equation is the struggling of conservative churches too, which is something obviously quite debated. But you know, one of the things that I picked up a while ago was that, at least in the United States, church attendance reached its peak during the Cold War. And in many ways, you know, I grew up and, you know, just outside of New York City, and my father loved to go into the city, as my grandmother did when my grandfather was pastoring in West Sayville, Long Island. And one of the regular stops we would make would be Riverside Church. And I grew up just, you know, there's this giant, massive church. It wasn't until really just a few years ago that I learned much about Rockefeller and the history of that church. And because growing up in the Christian Reformed Church, you know, even if you're on the left of the Christian Reformed Church, you still are, you still learn about the dangerous liberals further to the left of you, and they're a cautionary tale. But surely on one hand, you deal with, because my church is probably at least as elderly and at least as dying as yours. So I'm not going to play any games with you about that. And yours might be less elderly and less dying than mine. But it does lead one to ask the question, is there a future for this archetype of,
Sure.
And
Listen,
I know you've written about it, so I wanted to ask the question.
Oh, listen, I am not a Jamesian pragmatist. I'm a Christian. And I say I follow the example of Christ, and he died without a church and without followers. If the measure of a church is going to be how many people are in the pews during this decade or that decade. We are just sadly mistaken about what churches could be and should be. First of all, on the side of bigger is better, let's talk about some bigger and the Mormons, Jehovah's Witnesses, NRA. Like, give me a break. Islam. Numbers do not correlate to truth. They do not correlate to the wisdom of the community that is so numerous. They don't. It doesn't correlate to justice, law, any of those things. And small numbers, on the other hand, are sometimes very impressive. Talk about Martin Luther King, talk about Gandhi, talk about other civil rights heroes, talk about people who first came out as gay, or the United Church, which was the first national institution in Canada to promote gay rights. Numbers do not correlate to the worthwhileness or rightness or truth of any organization. And honestly, I think the United Church of Canada doesn't have much of a big numbers future, from having been the largest non-Catholic church to being one in the pack these days and having an older demographic profile. Yeah, we're not headed in the right direction. But I think we will still have an impact until we don't, and then someone else will pick up the handle of the race and finish it for us. I don't worry about numbers. What I do worry about is inspiring people of any religious background or none at all to make Toronto a better city and the world a more livable and just place.
And in many ways, this very much addresses Rod's question, because, this has been tried often. And I don't remember exactly where he says it, but, John very much sees what he's doing in Toronto as blessing the city of Toronto and bringing justice and doing all of those good things. And, everybody's going to have their opinion as to whether that church is doing good things. But my guess is that most of what the church is doing is probably very good things for its members, very good things. They're probably giving away food for the hungry. They probably gave away clothing. They probably allowed rooms for AA. They probably blessed the city in many ways. Now, you might disagree with perhaps some of their political agenda, but the fact that part of what has happened with respect to churches that sort of lose the Jesus focus, not all, but many churches that sort of lose the Jesus focus just get more and more political and cultural, and they just sort of fade away into the political and cultural background noise. That's often what happens to them. It's sort of what's been happening to the mainline church. And so there's something that goes on with all of these issues. And so to just say we're trying to make people better, that's a good thing to say, but it's not terribly specific. And so what's interesting is that when you get to the end of this conversation, he talks about Jesus. I want to make people more like Jesus. Now, obviously, it's his take on Jesus, but hey, in all fairness, I've got a take on Jesus too. And Jesus is bigger than he or I, and our takes and our grasp of Jesus is imperfect. And people have been trying to get a grasp on Jesus for a very long time. And that's why, again, for me, my Calvinism is not so much about my grasp on Jesus, but Jesus' grasp on me. Because he's much stronger than I am. He's much clearer than I am. It's his grasp I need to pursue. Now, my grasp is important because I need to have a grasp, but I'd rather have Jesus have optimal grip on me, because Jesus is the one who needs to act. So But it gets into this question of secularism, because in some ways, John moved away from the antithesis and more to secularism. Now, Phlebas said, 5 years ago or so or something, John met Phlebas's brother at Calvin's campus and tried to deconstruct him. There's a little bit of antithesis in there, huh? Is that's part of what's difficult for people when they sort of give up one antithesis to give up all the antitheticals? It doesn't happen because the antithesis is part of reality. And so a lot of really, really open people, the thing that they can't stand are people who aren't open. The perennials, the big problem with a lot of perennials is they can't stand people who aren't perennialists. And on and on and on and on we go. And I was listening to Jared the Atheist. He did a take on wheat. It was a beautiful video. It was a wonderful video. And I had Jared on the channel and I randoed him. And, I remember at but Saddleback Church in Southern California. I went there for a conference once back in my early days when I was, the seeker thing was all big and, young pastor coming into Sacramento. We got to get that church going in this important city. So we're going to send him to Willow Creek and we're going to send him to Saddleback. And I learned all that seeker stuff and I applied all that seeker stuff at Living Stones. And you know what? None of it worked at all. I love the way John ends this conversation. I listened to a lot of it again. Again, that's kind of why this thing is cool for me, because I can remember these old conversations. It's helping me sort of keep my narrative consistency now that I've sort of buffeted from the internet. But he says, why isn't your church growing? We tried the seeker stuff. We tried the sell stuff. I mean, part of the reason I know all these ways is because I tried them all. I won't mention his name, but he's like, if you spent less time making videos and more time working in your church, maybe your church wouldn't be dying. It's like, I've actually had, in some ways, a lot more success with my church because I've made videos. And we had, 3 of those 5 new members came through the videos last time, and more people are starting to trickle in again because of the videos. So, but John Sook is like, why isn't your church growing? It's like, well, it's an interesting church. It certainly isn't for everyone. But if my goal of everything I do on the internet is to bring people into Living Stones and make them living stoners, I'd be a complete failure. And so my goal with the TLC and Estuary, it's super broad. People are using Estuary for all kinds of things now. And TLC is a wild and woolly place. But people, I think, and part of why I don't go after celebrities to try to recruit them into this is because as long as it isn't fundamentally a celebrity fandom, then people's participation here will be about what they're getting out of it. I was talking to someone about, Tim Keller in New York City. When Tim Keller became really big, everybody wanted to go to his services. That became a problem because they didn't have one big giant church in Manhattan. That would have cost way more money than they would ever have. So their church kind of met in different places. But then wherever Tim was going to preach, everyone would go and listen to Tim preach. And Tim knew that he needed to have other preachers going. And so Tim sort of worked anti-celebrity. And so the TLC is anti-celebrity. If Russell Brand joined the TLC and started doing randos and all our people, and it would be a mess. And is God going to have that happen? I don't know. Is God going to have us more discovered? I don't know. But in many ways, I don't mind that it doesn't, because anybody who shows up on these live streams is showing up not because Luke Thompson won Dancing with the Stars, or Sam Tiedemann has now become the new voice of Christian Unitarianism in America. It's not because any of us are famous, because they show up because they want to talk. They want to relate. Why they want to relate, they might not even know, but they just have a sense that this is fun, this is wholesome, I'd like to play. And that's the way I want it. Because chasing celebrity, chasing money, chasing all of these things, the whole world is doing that. Just go out and do it with all of them. Fine. It's nothing wrong with chasing, being ambitious and doing all these things. There's nothing wrong with that. But when someone comes here, I want them to want to talk. So that's why, again, the randos are the here I'm talking to my friend Warren. Anybody else watching? Could be nobody. Let's see. 2 people. Me and someone else, and that computer might be that something left on or they fell asleep. But here I'm talking to my friend Warren, who brought me out to Australia, and on and on and on and on and on. So if you want a better TLC, build it yourself. I welcome that. So leave a comment. Let me know what you think.
Still I have it. There are moments I conveniently forget that I'm a 40-year-old man. The last vestiges of a ghost long dead. The ghost with a Messiah complex. A Messiah too lazy to rise or ascend. Happily hurt and hard. The hanger-on or haunting of a time past. A heroic dream of the harrowing of hell. Failure to launch. Cling to a life vest, treading in spells that linger and last. Mom and Dad, righteous and mad, daydreamers with ghosts of their own. My memory of them stoic, looking with aims to pretend. Always on the brink of somewhere. Each a child dancing on the fence. On down the river, dreamt in the sunshine. Saturday morning cartoons, the only Sabbath I knew. A disciple of Jim Henson and John Hughes. Worship in cathedrals where the Toys R Us, baptized in ball pits, a clown served the sacrament we eat. More Pepsi and Pizza Hut. Say please. Say cheese. Between Kurt Cobain, a scrambled cable screen, towers tumbling, Super Bowls, and reality TV, the ghost is constitutionally unwilling and intrinsically unable to see and be seen, searching madly for attention to seek. But you could be anything. Never say never. If you've got nothing nice to say, don't say nothing. Ever. Don't talk to strangers. See what I say. Just do it. You don't listen very well, do you? You don't do very well, do you? You're not looking too good, are you? Keep up. Appearances aren't what they seem. Will you ever grow up? You look like you're stuck. You think you took too much. Echoes the ghost within the host, who prays the dead bury their dead and stay buried in a fading dream.
Well, I don't know about the meaning crisis, left, right, black, white, or other vices, which Jesus Christ is right, or if we're all saved. From my perspective, our propositions participate procedurally, running in circles, humor and body, we're in the age of decay. Symbolically speaking, the reapers are reaping, them damn egregores are whispering sweetly. We're all NPCs in the belly of the beast. Red pill, blue pill, bread pill, Mars Hill, or DMT, or whatever you feel. Got one and number two, it's all the same damn thing. So clean your room, repent on Zoom, ontology for dummies, a bird's eye view. 'Cause if you really knew, could you really even say? Totally depraved, all totally saved, a total disposition from the bed we all made. Or is it the elect, or are we just insane? From John Vervaeke to Jonathan Pajot and Jordan Peterson to the Chris Pacou Show, Paul Vanderklays and Griswold Grimm and all the dice he shakes. This estuary ditty is a little bit cringy, ain't quite the U-shaped or the hero's journey. All the NPCs in the flood treading water to watch you save the day with a bunch of chitter-chatter. From the ortho bros to the Catholic Joes, or atheistic Jobs, to Protestant folks, the Joe Schmoes, and Jewish Jacobs, and everything in between. So love the Lord your God with all your heart and soul, with all your mind and your fingers and toes, all your neighbors too, as if they were your own. So love the Lord your God with all your heart and soul, and with all your mind and your fingers and toes, all your neighbors too, as if they were your own.